Joe, it's been the talk the entire day, at least maybe the last couple days, but the last day for sure, about USC recruiting. They lost some defensive linemen. Juju Lewis, their five-star quarterback, might be on, maybe his way out the door, some people believe. Your thoughts on what's going on at USC with recruiting?
Yeah, so they lost the commitments of five-star edge Isaiah Gibson and then five-star defensive tackle Justice Terry, two very highly touted recruits. You mentioned Juju Lewis. If you listen to any recruiting shows, and I listen to one of my favorite ones is the 247 Sports recruiting show. That one is fantastic. They talk a lot about how it feels a little off by how much attention he's giving a lot of these other schools. And all I'm saying is that there's not a lot of certainty there as you let in.
Rusty I am not going. Even today said on Crane & Co. that he thinks that he's going to Auburn. So it's
a lot of people think he's going to. There's a chance that he flips to Auburn.
Correct.
Right. I'm not going to hit the panic button, USC fans. I'm going to try to be a little level-headed about this, but this isn't great. It's good enough that we're early on in this cycle. It's not even July yet, when there's a lot of commitments that usually do come around the 4th of July. It's good for you that even if you miss out on these kids, maybe you could still convince them to come back, or you're going to be able to replace them with other premier talent. Maybe it's not a 5-star, but if you can get other high 4-stars, it's still replaceable. It's not as bad as what happened with Florida this past cycle, which on signing day, they lost a bunch of kids and almost lost a few others because of some late last-second recruiting. But all I will say, man, Lincoln has not done a good job of recruiting defense in his entire coaching career. He has very rarely developed at that position, and I think a lot of kids get excited about the opportunity to play for USC, play in Los Angeles, and then they have conversations with guys like Kirby Smart. And you said this in the open. I think this has a lot more to do with Kirby slamming his fist on the table and saying, you guys aren't taking anyone out of our area. Well, you're not taking 2 Georgia kids. You're not taking kids out of the South. 5-star defensive linemen out of the South, which we have succeeded and dominated at over the past 5 or more years that he's been there. I think a lot more of it has to do with that than it has to do with Lincoln Riley.
This could have been any coach in the country, Joe. It could have been literally anybody in the country. Now, I think here's the statement that I think Kirby Smart is making. Elijah Griffin and Justice Terry were supposed to be in Los Angeles on the 21st. So this Friday, they were supposed to be in town, go through a visit, and go through the weekend. The message I think is being sent here with Griffin and Terry decommitting is, look, they were supposed to go to teams that they were committed to, and Kirby is sending a message to everybody else. Hey, I know that I know that you're doing NIL stuff in the beginning before we really get things going in recruiting. You might want to just stop because you're not getting kids from here. And it wouldn't have mattered if it was Lincoln, if it was Ryan Day. Now, Ohio State is kind of in the mix here with some of these, so we'll monitor this. But I think that this has a lot to do with it too. And the kid Griffin or Terry, you never know. Ohio State seems to be in the mix. Joe, you got to recruit these type of dudes so that you have the ability to fix your things defensively. Now, I think that the issue here with talking about, and this being Lincoln and it being the defensive side of the football, he does have a new defensive staff. And if you're going to get those type of bodies that we ridicule him of not going and getting, you're going to miss every shot that you don't take. So I understand what you're saying. It's not a great look for him. Joe, this time last year, they weren't trying for this. They weren't trying to pull this off.
That's a fair point.
Okay,
fair point.
So now there's a difference in reference to now that he has DeLeone Lynn. Joe, recruiting has been different from them defensively. Maybe Alex Grinch did not recruit like DeLeone Lynn is and was and is going to. So I understand what you're saying. It is a big loss. These two defensive linemen, though, okay, going somewhere else doesn't surprise me. I think what people are surprised a little bit more by is Juju Lewis leaving. Now, Joe, I'm about to tell you something that I think that you will agree with. I always see, majority of the time, not always, because Caleb Williams did this. He did it the opposite. Joe, I think it's easier for West Coast quarterbacks to go to the South and to the East Coast than it is from an East Coast kid to go out West.
Mm-hmm.
I always feel like kids from California are going to go to the South. Bryce Young, Jaden Daniels coming down. I know he went to Arizona, but coming down to the SEC. We constantly see more of that. Lewis being a guy that's literally on the East Coast, making his way to the West Coast, I never thought was really going to be a work for them. Now Auburn gets in the mix here. So Julian Lewis being from Carrollton, Georgia, right there close to Auburn. Okay, like it's not far from Auburn at all. Joe, that just makes too much sense. He can be with the same type of explosive offensive coaches and not have to send his family to the West Coast 8 times a year.
Yep. No, it's a great point. It's where I think the recruiting hasn't really come to fruition. Part of it is trying to go and get these kids from the East Coast is just a tough sell. But you mentioned here, whatever happens with Lewis, it is very concerning if that does end up coming to fruition, that he does end up choosing to flip to Auburn. I raise the red flag at why are these kids decommitting so quickly? Why weren't they in the boat for the long haul? What were these conversations like? Because it just seems really weird that this is so quick of a turnaround with these recruits. I just don't know what's going on. And it makes me wonder if there is an inability to maintain long-term success in recruiting. They've been fine at recruiting, and this has been the best lead-up cycle that they've had, as you've mentioned. They didn't touch anything this competitive last cycle and the cycle before that in July. They weren't in that range. But I just don't understand, why can't they keep these kids committed? And is it foreboding that they're going to continue to struggle to keep kids committed? And on top of this, recruits seeing this, how do they stay bought in knowing that these other kids are deciding to change their mind? How can they stay bought in on playing for USC when other dudes who they're in group chats with are leaving the group chats?
Can I tell you what it's going to take? You ready?
What? Yeah.
Money and tons.
But I mean, it's Los Angeles. They're supposed to have as much money as these
Joe,
other.
Have you ever heard somebody talking about the Trojan Collective?
No.
Okay, and Joe, the opposite's happening in Oregon. The complete opposite is happening.
They've got Nike bankrolling them.
Joe, we're talking about LA. Okay, like
you're right. I mean, you're very right. You're very right.
Like, let's not act like that there's not money there. Like our buddy Eric Weinberger sent me LSU shirt today, like a rack from TJ Maxx. That some bitch was $37, and I'm like, bro, that would be $12 at our local dollar store. Like, I mean, what are we talking about here? If USC in recruiting wants to get serious, you got to do what Dan and them are doing, because Dan is going to go out there and legitimately wreak havoc in recruiting. So I know that there's been a lot of talk about them, Joe, in reference to what they're doing, but I think the biggest part here is I think Lincoln is trying, but I don't think he's got all the pieces in play.
Well, this is where it comes down to is, yeah, it's all nice and dandy that he's trying, but does trying win you championships? He needs to do more than try. He needs to finish. This goes in line with everything. He hasn't finished at Oklahoma when they were going to the playoff. In his first couple of years at USC, when they fell short in the Pac-12 championship game, they completely fizzled out last season. It feels like they're going 90% of the way and just not finishing. That has been his problem his whole career.
Well, Joe, it's not. I don't know if it's that they don't have talent in the state. I think they tried to go.
There is talent in the state.
Well, 100% there's talent in the state. I mean, look, you look at what Oregon got last year. Aiden Breland, the defensive lineman from California, commits to Oregon. Jericho Johnson from California, 6'3", 366, Joe. You think that they need somebody like that kid that can stuff up the middle? So they also go, Joe, multiple places to get other DNs and other places to get defensive talent. Legitimately, the West Coast is going to Oregon. So I look, he's got to. There's this old saying in the South. I don't know if it's necessarily said everywhere else. Joe, you got to lock the state down. You know, I know where the team that I cover every day, you know what everybody wants to talk about and hear? Lock the state down.
Yeah.
Lincoln's got so many leaks in his boat, the Titanic would be smiling.
And Kirby's literally doing this. That's the funny part. The juxtaposition
Correct.
of the two things is that Kirby let a couple kids get away, and he's coming back, and likely, if I bet at least one of these kids commits.
Oh.
And it's the proof of how important it is to get the regionality and then expand from there. I'm looking at the top the industry rankings on On3 for the California recruits. Dijon Lee is 87% projected to go to Alabama. Hassan Longstreet is a quarterback who is projected to commit to Texas A&M. Probably weren't really in conversations there. Adonis Curry is projected a cornerback, projected to go to Texas A&M. Noah Michael, 70% projected to go to Oregon, 11% to USC. Madden Faramo, linebacker, is supposed to commit to Notre Dame. Like, there's just a lot of these kids, man. A lot of the top kids. I look down here and they're going to Oregon. They're going to Texas A&M. It's just, he has been unable to get these kids to stay in the damn state.
It's a problem, man.
It's a huge state too.
And look, LA's got to, let me tell you something that I think that doesn't necessarily benefit USC. I don't know, this will just be my last point, but I don't know if the downturn of LA hasn't hurt the USC brand.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.